Most people ignored this car the first time they saw it. It wasn't a Tesla. It wasn't some futuristic luxury SUV with giant screens and insane horsepower. It was small, almost too small, a compact electric hatchback. Quietly revealed by Nissan while the rest of the auto industry was busy fighting over expensive EVs and oversized crossovers. But within weeks, something strange started happening. Analysts began paying attention. European buyers started talking about it non-stop. Even rival car companies started reacting. Because underneath this tiny electric car was a much bigger idea, and it had the potential to disrupt the entire EV market. What made the situation uncomfortable for competitors wasn't just the price. It was what Nissan managed to include at that price. Around $29,000 for a fully electric car with modern tech, fast charging, practical range, premium styling, and the kind of trust many buyers still associate with Japanese brands. On paper, that combination shouldn't exist yet, especially not from a company many people believed was already falling behind in the EV race. And that's what makes this story interesting. Because a few years ago, Nissan didn't look like a company leading the future anymore. In fact, many people thought the company had already missed its chance. Tesla had become the face of electric vehicles. Chinese brands like BYD and MG were expanding aggressively across Europe with cheaper models. Even traditional automakers were pouring billions into massive EV projects. Meanwhile, Nissan, the same company that once shocked the world with the Leaf, slowly disappeared from the center of the conversation. Its sales weakened in key markets. Competition became brutal. In Japan, younger buyers were losing interest in owning cars altogether. Chinese automakers were moving faster than expected, and for a moment, it genuinely looked like Nissan was becoming one more legacy brand, struggling to survive the transition into the electric era. But behind the scenes, Nissan was making a very different decision. Instead of chasing Tesla directly, they started looking at ordinary people, not enthusiasts, not luxury buyers, not people searching for 600 kilometers of range and insane acceleration, just normal drivers. People sitting in traffic every morning. People struggling with fuel prices. People trying to park inside crowded cities. People who wanted but couldn't justify spending luxury car money to get one. And once you understand that, the Micra EV starts looking very different, because this car was never designed to dominate headlines. It was designed to quietly solve problems. At first glance, the Micra almost feels playful. Round LED headlights, compact proportions, retro-inspired styling mixed with modern electric design. It looks friendly instead of aggressive. Even the unlock animation feels oddly human, like the car is greeting you before you get inside. But Nissan understood something most automakers forgot. People spend more time living with a car than admiring it. That's why the inside matters more. The moment drivers stepped into the Micra, expectations started changing. Dual digital displays, ambient lighting. Google built directly into the infotainment system, a cabin that felt far more premium than the price suggested. And suddenly, the conversation around the car shifted from, "This is cheap," to, "Wait, how is this cheap?" But this only matters once you see what Nissan was really doing underneath the car, because the biggest part of the strategy was invisible. Most people assumed Nissan built this EV from scratch. They didn't. The company quietly used one of the smartest cost-cutting systems in the modern auto industry, Alliance Engineering. The Micra shares major components with Renault's EV platform. Shared factories, shared battery development, shared production systems. That meant Nissan avoided spending billions developing an entirely separate electric architecture. And that changes everything, because making EVs affordable has never just been about batteries. It's about scale, manufacturing, supply chains, shared parts, production efficiency. Companies like Tesla and BYD already understood this. Nissan simply found a way to apply the same logic while still keeping the emotional identity of a Japanese city car. Then came the battery decision. Nissan offered two versions. One focused on affordability and safety, using LFP battery chemistry. The other focused on longer range and stronger performance using NMC batteries. To most buyers, those names mean almost nothing. But for the EV industry, this was a signal. Nissan wasn't building one perfect car. They were building flexibility, The cheaper version targeted first-time EV owners who only needed daily commuting range. The larger battery-targeted drivers still worried about long-distance travel. And by offering both, Nissan avoided forcing customers into expensive configurations they didn't actually need. That sounds simple, but in the current EV market, it's surprisingly rare. And this is where the story starts getting uncomfortable for Nissan's competitors, because the Micro doesn't beat Tesla in raw performance. It doesn't beat BYD in manufacturing dominance. It doesn't outperform Toyota's reputation for long-term reliability. But it attacks something far more dangerous: buyer psychology. For years, the EV market kept moving upward. Bigger batteries, bigger vehicles, bigger prices. Automakers acted like the future of electric cars had to feel futuristic and expensive. The Micro quietly challenged that assumption. What if most people don't actually want giant EVs? What if they just want something affordable, trustworthy, easy to own, and pleasant to drive? Suddenly, expensive electric vehicles start looking excessive for millions of buyers. And Europe turned out to be the perfect testing ground for this idea. Smaller roads, expensive parking, high fuel costs, dense urban living. In many European cities, oversized SUVs already feel inconvenient. The Micro arrived at exactly the moment many drivers were becoming exhausted by the complexity and rising costs of modern cars. That timing mattered. Reviewers started calling it one of the most sensible EVs in years. Not revolutionary, not extreme, just smart. And ironically, that made it stand out even more. Because while the rest of the market chased attention, Nissan focused on practicality. But there's still a major risk hiding underneath all of this. Chinese automakers are moving incredibly fast. Companies like BYD can often produce EVs cheaper and at larger scale. Their pricing pressure is already reshaping the global industry. And even though many buyers still trust Japanese quality more, trust alone may not be enough forever. Nissan knows that. That's why the Micro feels less like a standalone product, and more like the beginning of a survival strategy, a way to re-enter the EV conversation before the market fully settles. And, strangely, the car may already be doing something even more important than generating sales. It's changing how people think about small cars. Again, for years, compact cars were treated like compromises, cheap transportation, basic commuter vehicles, something you bought only if you couldn't afford more. But the Micro reframes smallness as intelligence instead of limitation. Easy parking becomes freedom. Lower energy consumption becomes efficiency. Compact design becomes practicality. And suddenly, the future of EVs starts looking very different from what the industry promised a few years ago, because maybe the next phase of electric vehicles won't belong to the companies building the fastest cars. Maybe it belongs to the companies that make EV ownership finally feel realistic for ordinary people. And if that turns out to be true, then this tiny Nissan may end up representing something much bigger than anyone expected. What makes this even more surprising is that Nissan didn't arrive first. In fact, that may have helped them. While early EV companies spent years teaching customers what electric cars even were, Nissan got to watch everything happen in real time. They watched Tesla normalize charging networks and software-focused vehicles. They watched Chinese companies learn how to reduce battery costs at terrifying speed. They watched governments across Europe push harder toward electric adoption, while consumers simultaneously became frustrated with rising vehicle prices. And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, Nissan noticed a gap nobody was really owning: affordable EVs that still felt emotionally safe. Because buying a car isn't purely logical. People say they care about specs, range, horsepower, and charging speeds. But when it comes time to actually spend money, trust suddenly matters more than almost everything else, especially during a major technology shift. That's one reason the Micro carries so much weight despite its small size. For many buyers, this isn't just another EV, it's their first EV, and first impressions shape entire. Markets.Nissan understood that if someone's first electric car experience feels stressful, complicated, or financially painful, they may never fully embrace the transition. So instead of overwhelming customers with futuristic gimmicks, the Micro focuses on reducing anxiety. Simple dimensions, familiar controls, comfortable seating position, predictable range, fast enough charging without sounding overly technical. Even the design itself feels intentional, modern enough to look fresh, but still recognizable enough that older drivers won't feel alienated by it. That balance is incredibly difficult to achieve because right now, the auto industry has a strange problem. Many EVs are technologically impressive, but emotionally exhausting. Massive touchscreens replacing every physical button, software menus controlling basic functions, constant updates, subscription features, overcomplicated interiors, trying too hard to look futuristic